This is Journeys with your host, Kiefer Collison. Brought to you by Prince Rupert Port Authority, linking a world of opportunity. Online, rupertport.com.
Hello and welcome back to Journeys. Again, I'm Kiefer Collison, and today I'm speaking with Oscar Dennis about revitalizing the Tahltan language. And, well, here is our conversation.
My name is my name is Hutsata. My English name is Oscar Dennis Sr. I'm Tahltan, and I'm residing in Iskut right now, Iskut, BC. I have a master's degree in First Nation Studies and anthropology degree in a bachelor's anthropology, and I'm back in Iskut working on the conservation of my language with my father. My father is 82 years old right now, going on 83, and he's one of the last remaining native speakers of our language who grew up on the land as a nomad. So I'm putting all my time into the conservation, digitizing and archiving the language before he's gone. He's a real high-level speaker who spoke the language as a child, as a nomad on the land. So he really knows the language. So that's what I've been doing.
Now, what you say digitize it, what does that exactly mean?
I've been studying the language for 5 years. In September will be 5 years, and as I studied, I digitally record everything that I learned to speak it, and then I now speak my language with my father. I'm at the point now where I'm speaking in abstract, and I've recorded everything we say, and more. Like, say, for instance, I do yoga, and one of the poses requires that I stand on my tiptoe, and my father's not with me when I'm doing the yoga, and I realize, how do you say stand on tiptoes? So when I come back to see him and I sit down and eat a meal with him, because we basically live together, I would ask him how to say standing on your tiptoes, stuff that you don't normally get in a formal interview. And I record it all, then I transfer it to my computer and archive it on hard drives, iCloud, and on discs.
You said the state, so what is the state of the Tahltan language in your eyes?
Very endangered. I think we have about, we calculate we have 17 speakers. Some say 20, but roughly 17. We do have speakers, and these speakers aren't totally fluent. There's speakers who could speak, but they're not fluent. If you don't know how to speak the language, it appears like we have 20 speakers, but in reality, we have less than 17 who know the language real well. And language, like especially our indigenous language, it stopped evolving in the 1930s. After the 1930s, we didn't invent words. We started using definitions for words. And the last native speaker who learned the language as a child is now 44 years old. No child has learned the language. And even in our language programs, we had a program in our schools for 40 years, and within that 40 years, our language died, and not one child has learned to speak our language. So our language is really endangered.
What are some of the steps that you think need to be taken in order for it to be preserved? And then on the second part of that, what's the importance of preserving your language?
Well, language is so important. Language is ethnicity. It's part of your identity, and that's one of the reasons. That's the motivating factor in me studying my language is not for academics, although I did do my master's thesis in my language. I studied my language because I made a vow to my father that, first of all, I made a vow to myself that I wasn't going to die speaking a language from across the ocean, from a land I've never seen, which is the language we're using to do this interview. And also, there's a colonial aspect to it. I did not want to die speaking the colonial language of my oppressor. And I also made a vow to my father that when he was passing, should he pass before me, or when I'm passing, I would like to be speaking my language, during this, amazing, transformation. And what was the first question?
Sorry?
What was the first question?
Just the importance of the language?
I remembered. Why is the situation the way it is? Well, one of the things that we have to realize, and this is real controversial, and I get into a lot of trouble about it, because I make observations on our situation. And when you take a look at our language, we're not talking only about the Tahltan language. We're talking about indigenous languages across the board. And I could say this, like I speak publicly, and I just spoke last week at the college in Whitehorse, and Whitehorse is all Dene, like we speak the Dene language. We speak the Tahltan dialect of the Dene language. And after I spoke twice. I spoke at a movie. It was a film festival, so I spoke after this documentary that I participated in and worked on, and then I spoke at the college the next day. And in both situations, after I spoke, native people approached me, and they pointed out that everything that I had to say was legit, and it was affecting them the same way in their communities. And I spoke about how our language died amidst our language program. And we're not evaluating the situation and being honest about why our language is dying. In most cases, we blame the parents. But, I use the analogy that, the children are studying our language in the schools where they're studying English and math. And they say the parents aren't using the language at home, but the parents are not talking math at the dinner table either. And these children are learning math and then going into the universities and being able to keep up at a university level because they have the background not only in English but also in math. And so, under those situations, you have to question, why is the language not being passed on? And one of the things that I realized when I started studying my language with my father and other informants, once I caught on to the language, I realized that speakers of the language are not necessarily teachers. And the other analogy I use for that, my dad, showed me the language. He didn't teach me. It took me years, like 2 years before I started to catching on, because he was using loose translations. And one of the examples is he taught me how to say store. I said, how do you say store? Because store is always a part of the core conversational pieces. We're involved in this capitalist economy where we supplement our diet with traditional food rather than the other way around. So we spend a lot of times in the stores. And my dad said, so he taught me how to say, I'm going to the store, which is, and it took me 2 years to realize the word for store didn't mean store. It's in my language. And what that really means is always from purchase house. And one day after 2 years of studying, I was sitting there saying, always from, and then I said, Keri. I didn't understand what Keri was, but I knew Kima meant house. So I went to my father and I says, what does Keri mean? He says, it means store. I said, but means always from. And he says, yes. I said, so what Keri means? He says, it means to buy. And what does Kima mean? I said, that means house. He says, yes, always from. He says, it means store. And it didn't. So and that was just one of the examples. Another example that I see in one of our dictionaries, when they use English as an index in one of our dictionaries, and they say rainbow, and the Tahltan word for rainbow is yatlula, and yatlula actually means sky rope. It doesn't mean rainbow. Tahltan would be rainbow. So when you're looking at this and you're looking at the way the language is being translated and the way the people are putting it forth, they're not really given our language in its true essence, and no one's really catching on because it's not proper. So those are one of the reasons, and economic plays a key role in our language. Like you have two types of successes when it comes to the language. You got literal success and you got bureaucratic success. When you take a look at the government right now, the Canadian government is putting an effort into the revitalization of indigenous languages, and on a bureaucratic level, it looks really good. You got the funding coming in, you got, the administration administering these funds to the revitalization of our language, and everything looks good, and you have our languages now being taught at university level, but at the same time our language is dying because a bureaucratic success doesn't add up to literal success in the revitalization of our language. So there's all these different aspects at play when you look at the problem, and those are not being addressed. Economics play a key role, politics play a key role, and the reality isn't being addressed. And one of the reasons why I say it's controversial is because when I point it out, I get accused of being disrespectful. I be accused of, all these things that just don't fit the model, the Indian Act political model, and I get marginalized, and I don't get work because I point out the reality of our situation. And it's at it's at the price of our language this happens.
It was interesting what you said about the store and how I don't think, just from in my life being around, First Nations languages coming from Haida Gwaii, it's kind of, it's there's no beating around the bush with the language that we used to, speak. It's just, here it is, and this is how we phrase it. It sparks my memory of, there's a Haida word, kiu. It means ear. Mm-hmm. It means clam. It means road. It means ladder. And it means door. Because they are all entrances and exits to a different space. Mm-hmm. So it's just, it's just interesting to hear you talk about how you broke that down and figuring that out. What other things have you learned on your journey to learning your own language?
Oh, it's just amazing because the language, language is not just, it's not just vocabulary and words. Language is a whole new way of looking at the world. So when you study a language, you learn a new way of seeing. And one of the main things about it is when you're a First Nations person and you're living on your territory, or even if you're not, but if you're living on your territory with our language is so intimately connected to the land. And it's not only connected to the land, it's connected to a nomadic lifestyle because we were nomads on our land. And everything that we have to do, everything that our language has to do with the land. And it's just amazing. In our language, we have a pronoun, a personal pronoun for our land. Like say, for instance, a personal pronoun "you" would be a second person personal pronoun. "Me" would be the first person personal pronoun in English. "Him" would be the third person or her third person personal pronoun. While in Tahltan, the land has a personal pronoun as well. It has a personal pronoun for and like say, if I were to say the land was beautiful, K would be the personal pronoun for the land. If I were to say you're beautiful, N would be the personal pronoun for you, and S would, like Sonalina, S would be the personal pronoun for me. Konalina for the land, Sonalina for you, Monalina for him. So it's totally different than English. And the other thing about Tahltan is we have a personal pronoun for three-dimensional space plus time, and it's the prefix ho. So when we talk about moving about in this environment, we add this personal pronoun for three-dimensional space plus time. Like that's why I would say uwits ikeri hotzi would be two, sort of like two there. There is a aerial marker, but ho is not necessarily an aerial marker because there's so much potential in this environment that we don't really put it's not a spot, it's the universe. And when you start looking at the world like that, it's amazing because after you start speaking the language, it's not something that you even have to practice. It's just something that you feel. When you use the term, you actually feel it subconsciously.
Now, what really sparked your interest in learning the language and getting back to it and really moving back to your roots and, getting in with your dad?
It's so political. I did a lot of work on the fight for the sacred headwaters. I'm not sure if you're aware of all the fighting we've done up there and all our successes, and that was all based on my identity as well. So it all goes back to identity. I'm not comfortable speaking with my father, and now at home in my mom and my dad's home, we speak the language at least 70% of the time. So I'm no longer having to speak a language from England, from, like I said, a land that I've never seen. And it just makes me feel so much better. Sometimes I had to remind myself that, wow, my dad's speaking to me in my language, and I understand everything he's saying, no different than when he speaks English. So a lot of times we're switching between the two, and it's really a major part of who I am now. And I think it should be a major part of everyone, all the indigenous people's identity, because language is an ethnicity.
Why do you think people are so hesitant, or not hesitant, they're just not mobilizing as much as you think people should be to learning their own languages? Because we hear about it in the media all the time, but yet, our speakers are few and far between.
It never ceases to amaze me. I mean, we got teachers and grandparents and parents who won't give it 5 minutes. Like I try sharing my work not only with my friends but with family members, and they give it a smile. They take a look at it and they give it a smile, and as I watch and observe their reaction, they couldn't sit there for 2 minutes before their mind's gone, and they. Like, it's, wow, this is nice, it's nice, and we have to speak our language, and they make a little effort, but it's just amazing. I just couldn't understand how something so important could be given such little weight, and it's almost like a distraction from their busy schedule. It's just they're caught up with life, and life is fast paced, and life involves keeping up to the Joneses and surviving economically in this reality. You got your car payments and your house payments and your food, and another one of the things that real strikes me is and it has nothing, it's connected to the language, but it has to do with diet and obesity and cancer and sugar diabetes and all these stuff that's affecting our people. It's not only affecting their physical health, it's affecting their brain as well. So on a cognitive level, they're not here. And language is so important, and yet it's, they have hopes that one day they'll learn, but hoping's not going to get it, and that's what I experience on all levels.
Now, what were some of the biggest surprises that came to you with this journey that you've embarked on learning your language?
Well, my language is really an amazing language. My language is, the Dene language is real complex, and it's oxymoron to say what I'm going to say, because it's really complex, but the complexity simplifies it once you catch on to how it works. And our language, the Dene language, was used as a code system against the Japanese in World War II, and there's a movie on it with Adam Beach. I think it's called Wind Talker.
Yeah, Wind Talkers.
Yeah, and the reason why they did that was because the language is designed it's sort of encoded, and it's based on patterns. And when you catch on to these patterns, these amazing patterns, it simplifies it, but yet it's complex. And I'm actually at a stage where there's something happening in my mind now. I'm going up on 5 years, and I'm starting to see my mind pulling it together. But I can't really put a finger on what's happening right now, and it's the way it works that's coming together now, and it's really amazing. The Dene language is amazing, and the jury is out, but they also consider Haida to be a part of the Na-Dene language. But the experts in linguistics, they're not quite sure. They say yes it is, yes it isn't. So.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I went up to Telegraph Creek one time and I watched a cultural performance, and the Crow song is almost identical to our Raven song. Mm-hmm. I could almost sing it word for word, and never hearing it before, same beat, same rhythm. And I was just guessing that maybe it was from the Tlingit who kept it alive for us and then gifted it back to, our ancestors. But just to come up there and to hear that, the familiarity mm-hmm. of the music, I was just like, wow. And here I am in Telegraph Creek, coming from Haida Gwaii. I'm thinking, how the heck am I here in Telegraph Creek listening to our music? You know what I mean? Like, yeah. It's a very strange feeling. And that was the most connected I've ever felt to the First Nations, because, from my perspective, coming from this island, I don't really know what the heck's out there. But then I go all the way. You take that, 500-mile or kilometer drive through those cliffs up to Telegraph, and then to hear the song, it was just, it's interesting to hear you say that again.
And it's amazing because we're all connected through water. Yeah. You come from like Haida Gwaii. When I think of Haida Gwaii, I think of water. Not only that it rains and it's so beautiful with all that water, but the water that's coming from my area, it comes up in clouds from your area, and it's we're all connected through water.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you, again, going back to the digitizing of the language, you're working on an app, or you have an app for the Tahltan language?
I've been working on, like, the digitizing process. Don't only involve the recording it and digitizing it through the work that I'm doing with recording it. It also involves, I've taken a lot of the recordings and I've transferred. I've taken it and I've turned them into apps. And one of the things that I'm doing is, I'm not a programmer, but I know how to use applications, and I use the platform, the iBooks platform. And I take the iBooks platform and I develop iBooks and I develop apps. And right now I'm working on. I have an app that I'm working on with my nephew. His name is Mick Dennis, and so I develop an app for him to start studying because he wants to learn the language. He's 18 years old, and he helped me design it in telling me what he wants. So I told him, you need to work on the core conversational pieces. What are you sharing with your friends? What you want to share with your brother and your dad. So I sat down with him and his brother, and we decided on the contents of this app. And one of the things that I've done, like, I could build an app. And one of the things that one of the models that I've used, I've studied Russian, and I have Russian apps. And these apps focus on the core conversational pieces, and it's not overwhelming. You had to buy, $2 app and another $2 app to keep up, and once you start learning. So what we've done was we designed the app with, say, greetings, important words like what, who, how, them, him, all those important words that we use to make conversation. And then stuff like eating and making tea or splitting wood or whatever that they do on a daily basis. And I put it into this application called iBooks, and I design it like an app. So when you open it, it opens like a regular app. However, it's designed on a totally different platform, and it requires no programming skills. Just you take it, and if you could manipulate 2 or 3 different programs, and that's what I do. I manipulate these programs and I use them together and I tie them together and I come up with these awesome apps. And these apps have audio, like it has an audio component, a visual component, and they have video. I could put video in there, and I use my 82-year-old father because he's a native speaker, but sometimes he speaks so well when he's speaking sentences and phrases that the beginners couldn't pick it up. So as an English speaker, I would speak it because my English accent comes through, and I would help them like that. And then once we have it, I have it on the app and I have it on the iPhone. And I designed this for iOS. I'm not using Android. And once I have it on the iPod Touch, then we also have a Facebook page, whereas they could contact me on Facebook, and with Facebook Messenger from their device, they could actually record themselves. So when they have questions regarding the stuff on the app, we just go to Facebook with our group Facebook page, and then they contact me and they send me pronunciations. They record themselves and send it to me automatically, and we work like that. So this app that I'm working with these young people in our community, it's really amazing, and we could use it as a platform for all the languages. It's because like I could take this app and I could go to, say, the Tsimshian, for instance, and I could look at their language and focus on it, and not necessarily have to speak the language. Work with one of their speakers or teachers, and we could take this platform and design it for their language. And like right at the moment, I don't have government funding. I don't have a job. I'm really, really passionate about my language, and I want to learn it. So I'm back on my reserve, studying my language with my father, and so I'm involved right now. I'm fundraising. I'm doing crowdfunding through Indiegogo, and on Indiegogo, there's a sample of what I'm done. I screencast and I mirrored my iPod with a mirroring program called Reflector 2. And I opened up my app from my iPad, mirrored it onto my Mac desktop, recorded the whole thing, demonstrated how my app works. Then I put the video onto my Indiegogo site, which is Tahltan Language Conservation Initiative Program. And so there's a sample there if you want to look at what I'm doing and, want to apply what I'm doing to any of these other languages that are endangered along the coast. I mean, look at my program, and if you have any sense of, working with applications, you can just replicate it, and it's there. It's available for everyone to look at, and but it's on my crowdfunding page.
Okay, right on. And Oscar, before we got to wrap things up here, I'm just wondering if you could share some of your language with me, one of your favorite phrases or something with you. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Well, what I'll do is I'll share our greetings, so the Tahltans that are listening would be able to use it, as the first thing in our language when we say hello. And I get the amazing thing is I've studied. My great grandfather was born in 1886, and there was a linguist by the name of O'Grady who recorded him when he was 79 years old in 1965. And my grandfather's been dead since the 80s, my great grandfather. But I used a lot of these recordings in my study, and he says in the recordings, he says in Tahltan, when you says hello, you says ha. That's hello in Tahltan. But to ask someone how they're doing, you can't really ask someone how they're doing in Tahltan, because you could ask them what they're doing. And in English, you could say how you're doing, but in Tahltan, you can't necessarily say that. So what you say is you say, Duda ant how's your state? Like, how's your state of being? And the answer would be, Soga ast ninik aji. Ninik aji sort of means like you too, but it actually means you again, but it's in reference back to the question that you asked to begin with, right? Like, how are you doing? So that's that. That's how easy. There's formal ways to introduce, but it gets real long. And it's Duda ant how's your state? Soga ast my state is good. Ninik aji. And you? It's sort of like, and you? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thanks for stopping by the studio. It's awesome to hear, and I'm sure we'll be keeping in touch and looking forward to bright things coming out.
Yeah, thanks. And people want to see see the app and the demonstration. Just go to my Indiegogo page, Tahltan Conservation Initiative Program, and it's there.
Once again, that was Oscar Dennis. Check out his Indiegogo page. Go to Indiegogo.com and then type in Tahltan Language Conservation Initiative Program, and it will pull up the page for you. My name's Kiefer Collison, leaving you with some love, peace, and Ulican grease. And until next time, keep it real.
This has been Journeys with Kiefer Collison. Join us next time for more conversations about culture and the issues affecting First Nations people in BC. Brought to you by Prince Rupert Port Authority, linking a world of opportunity. Online, rupertport.com.